And I like to look back, when we can look back at our games and say, no one would have made this if we didn't make this, that tends to be a pretty good sign. It doesn't guarantee that the game will be a hit by any means. It doesn't guarantee that it'll get good reviews or whatever, but at least we can sort of rest assured that we made something distinctive that hopefully could create a positive experience for the players who do decide to take it up. And then that's a pretty good outcome. Bring something into being that can create a positive experience and wouldn't have existed if you didn't make it yourself. So I think we look for that quality while being mindful of like how we're more mindful now of just how to even let me or I can back up by way of to rephrase this part. Hades was the first game that we worked on that we planned from the start. Like our other games, from Bastion to Transistor to Pyre, each game was kind of like more experimental than the last, and we spent a lot of time in pre-production just figuring out what the heck we were doing. And then when the time came to start like marketing and promoting the game, we had to find the words to even describe what we were working on. And with Hades, and I was a big proponent of this myself, it's like, we're eventually going to have to market this thing. We're eventually going to have to say what it is. Why don't we try to come up with some of those terms immediately in expressing what the so-called vision of this game even is? Like, what are we going for? And if we can come up with something that sounds pretty good on paper, that's probably a pretty good starting point for the project. So Hades was like a more sort of cohesive idea than that of our previous games, and that's something that worked out very well for that game. So I think it's something we'll probably continue doing, is just trying to have a more articulate idea of what we want to work on from the beginning. That may, I'm not proposing that I don't think that's like something every developer should do. That's just something that has worked out well for us over the years of our like different sort of experimenting and prototyping and types of pre-production cycles on our games. Yeah, so that's a lot of thoughts on that subject, but it's obviously a very like, if anyone had the formula right for how to like stand out in a crowded market, like they would just do that over and over. It's just like, even if you think what it takes at a given time, chances are when you finish your next game, if you can even finish it, right? Like the whole world may be totally different, and like you're like you have to keep evolving your practices in this regard, because standards are always changing. It's back to that issue, like the fundamental challenge of game development, that the moment you feel anything resembling mastery, everything moves ahead, and you have to keep learning and keep improving.
Right. Well, the one key thing I got from all of that, which was extremely insightful and everything, was just simply when you said making sure it's its own identity. Because you can easily, any game out there is going to be derivative of something else, right?
Yeah,
I would say chances are, right? And plus the extreme side, if it's so unique and different that then it could fall flat, or it could be amazing. Who knows? But I think the main point that you made is just having its own identity, and that way it's just like you said, through your Supergiant's process in terms of the story and design and all elements that are incorporated into your games. They stand alone because you guys are very aware and in creating that it's its own identity. And yeah. So I love that part. Mustafa, anything else that you wanted to add or comment on?
I would just say I'm appreciative of the concept of like considering what hindsight's going to look like for your project, and really thinking about looking back on it and how you're going to feel about it, kind of looking back after the fact. Like I feel like that's something that I think especially when we're creatives and you're driven by so much passion, you kind of focus on the creation of something in the moment, and you think a lot about like what it's going to be when it's finished, but not so much what it's going to be 5, 10, 20 years after it's finished.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting angle, and something that could probably really help to amplify those feelings towards something. And I think it worked out because, not for nothing, obviously speaking kind of presumptuously here, but like, obviously in since launch, we've seen a lot of the kind of impact of Hades, not just like for people who have played it, but kind of in the overall pop culture zeitgeist around, discussing games. So, it seems like that's going to work out from that angle.
I mean, it's the looking on games in hindsight thing is very important to me personally. Like I was saying, I was just talking about Bastion again as an example, right? Quite a bit. It's like that's a game we worked on literally. We shipped it 10 years ago. So yeah, it'll be 10 years old this year. So it's. I think I said it before. I don't want to have any regrets about it. And it's not about like how the degree to which it succeeds. Well, it depends. Success is like measured in many different ways, if it can be measured at all. I think there are like there are abstract aspects of success that are really difficult to measure, such as how do you personally feel about your work. That can be really different from what numbers may tell you. And so that has to do with like, how like the entire development process potentially. It's like, did you, maybe you made the game of the year or something, but did you run yourself into the ground while doing so, or were you able to like maintain a more healthy pace or something like that? So it's seeking that balance is really, really important for us, since like I said, we want to be in it for the long haul. And just like not, it's not about it would be disingenuous to say like, oh, you must never compromise, because it's just you compromise all the time as a game developer. Like you're always having to make decisions about when to move on from something, when deciding that something is as good as you're probably going to be able to make it, even if it could ostensibly be better in some way. Like maybe if that other more extraordinarily talented developer out there worked on it instead of you. So like compromise is part of development, but it's making peace with it. It's making the like decisions that in your heart to be the right ones for the team, for the project. And if you can just do that consistently, then hopefully you can look back on your work with a degree of fondness, however it turns out. It's interesting because the degree of its success may like that isn't the main factor necessarily in how you as a developer might end up looking back on the project. I think that's something I learned myself, because having worked on these games that thankfully have been well regarded, but it's like it's just one part of how I feel about it when the sort of dust starts to settle, and what the reviews are and stuff like that. I care about all of it, to be clear. As a former game critic, I do really value reviews, and I do value like what players have to say and what the hindsight on it is, but it's just kind of one part of the equation.
It's awesome. And yeah, thank you for that additional insight too. I mean, just going into it and sharing that, basically that mindset that I think is important, and defining what success is so important, because there's so many people out there, and this is with any industry, right? How much money am I making? Because to some degree, that's like it's everybody's dream job or whatever, right? Whatever they're passionate about or doing. But looking at it, and this is something like I'm big and I'm a big follower of too, is like, how do you define success, and is it really just all come down to numbers? And I'm glad you said that, because I think some people can get really caught up in the numbers of things, whatever they are, and not look at how are things well balanced. How did like it make you feel like, and I think it gives not just you on a personal level, but it says a lot about your team and Supergiant too. Is like that's like probably a big core philosophy. Having that mindset. And I would like to shift that too, just to, as we start to close here, for just lessons learned. I mean, because, and maybe this is what I'm going to be asking you, what I just said, but you tell me, you guys have come a long way, like, Supergiant, and transitioned into a recognized icon basically for indie devs and players alike. So what would you guys say is the core value that Supergiant has followed? And why would you say that you dedicated so much attention around it?
Yeah, it's hard. Similar to favorite animated movie, it may be hard to pick just one, but the number of the values that is really, really important to us isn't an enormous list. I'm trying to think of what's the one and only one. I think if I had to pick one, it is I'm still struggling. There's an inward facing one and there's an outward facing one, right? There's one that's with respect to how we make things, and one that's with respect to like what we make and its relationship to our players / customers. Customers being one of those like icky sounding words, yeah. But again, in the if you accept that the business and the art are not in conflict, then you must accept that your players are your customers. Like they paid for something that you put out, and they're sort of like they're entitled to at least the thing that you said you were going to give them. So. Yep. I'm comfortable using that word, even though I acknowledge it has its kind of gross sounding connotation. The internally, like it's all about us sticking together. The idea that we as a team are in this together, that we navigate the challenges and the conflicts that we run into together, and that recognizing that we're basically on this something that Amir, our studio director, who I mentioned before, he articulated well, the idea that we're on the same side of a problem. Creative conflict happens frequently at Supergiant, and I think if we all had kind of the same personality and outlook on things, our games would be way worse. They're born as a result of us having like a pretty different set of personalities on the team, different sets of interests and tastes. And so we give each other feedback. We kind of argue over stuff, but hopefully again, in like a constructive way that leads us to a better result. But recognizing that we're like, that we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, as obvious as that sounds, it's really, really important to keep in mind. And our games are like, part of that is manifest in the fact that like our games are not, even though my title is like creative director or whatever, it's not like the games don't come from any one person. Like my job involves trying to like find the kind of connective tissue between disparate ideas. It's not to tell people what they should make. It's to like hopefully contribute to an environment where they feel creatively liberated to do the work that excites them the most, and then find ways to tie that all together. So if we can create this environment where everyone is fired up to do their best work and generally is on the same page about the trajectory of the project, then we're in a really good spot. And then we could have really honest conversation, give each other direct feedback about where things are going. how things are doing and so on, and we could establish that like consistent quality bar. So, and then when